This podcast is brought to you by the School of Advanced Study, University of London. All of our podcasts are available from our website, www.sas.ac.uk.
Good afternoon, everyone. The text that we had for discussion was Paya Ziefle, is that how you pronounce it? Suna. And we kicked out the session just by mentioning how well it fitted with the plenary session, in particular with Elizabeth's paper, because it also deals with pregnancy and motherhood after the migratory experience. And I thought that was an interesting comment to begin with. Then we were given some background information on the text, and I think probably some of this information is probably relevant for those of you who have read the text. And we were told that Suna is the name of the narrator, and it's also the title of the book. But she's also known in the novel as Marina or Luisa, and she's in the beginning of the novel, she approaches a doctor because her child can't sleep, and the doctor tells her that the reason for that being is that she the mother, and also the child in a sense, have to find their root, and that's really kind of the starting point and the reason for the novel, which is the story then that Luisa or Suna tells her daughter, if I understood correctly. So it is really a story about that particular family roots that she investigates throughout the novel. Now, the excerpt that we had to read refers to Julka, and that is Luisa, Suna, or Marina's mother, who is a Serbian girl who comes to Germany, to West Germany, in the early 1970s, as part of an invitation scheme by the German government, who invites guest workers for temporary employment in West Germany. And this was only valid for 2 years. And they had to be, the workers who were coming had to be not married, and they had to return to their original home countries after those 2 years. So the problem really starts here in the novel, in the sense that Julka's, and in the excerpt that we had to read, is pregnant, and so a whole range of issues raised from that event. Yes. Then we gave a lot of thought to the other character of the excerpt, and that is Julka's German boss, who is also a mother, a woman and a mother. And we started by saying that there seems to be quite a benign portrayal of this kind German woman who decides to rescue this Serbian worker. So in a sense, she seems to come on to a rescue, and it seems that all sorts of tensions are omitted from that relationship, and hence that could explain also the positive feedback that the German press and the public in general have given to the book. And we also highlighted, starting from that, we started highlighting some sort of ambivalence in that relationship between the German boss and the Serbian worker, mentioning, for example, things like the fact that she is not really rescued, or she may not have been rescued because the German boss felt just sorry for her worker, but also because she was her best worker. She was the one who spoke German, who was able to translate German to the other foreign workers. And so in a sense, she was also the one who fitted more into this German context. She was also ambitious, and she was determined to make the most of that experience. And that is also, in fact, highlighted in the text, in the dialogue section between Julka and her German boss. Yes, then we thought about this German boss as, in a sense, mothering Julka. And so maybe there's also the possibility here of a kind of woman's solidarity that you were also addressing, and raising also the issue of what is to be a mother. Is the mother the person who gives birth, or is it the person who nurtures the child? And so the novel, in a sense, we were told, also addresses that throughout the other sections, and the excerpt is exemplificative of that. On the other hand, it also seems that in the text, Julka, the Serbian girl, so Luisa's mother, seems to think that biological and physical relationship between mother and child are actually crucial, and hence the story is also about recapturing that lost bond between different generations of mothers in relation to their children. And then we move on to consider if this wasn't a sort of biological essentialism on behalf of the writer. And I have to say there is also a very strong autobiographical element here, as apparently in the other two texts for discussion, given that the writer is also half Turkish, or comes from a Turkish and German background, isn't it? We seem to struggle a bit with an expression that shows up halfway through the text, and that is the German worker, when she suggests to Julka to go back to Serbia to have a child, and then to abandon her and return to Germany. And in that context, the narrator tells us that the German boss is unpleasantly moved by that possibility, and we struggled a bit with the meaning of that expression, and in terms of what that expressed of the relationship between Julka and that German woman. Then we also considered the male section of the text. We thought that the text was really divided into parts, one addressing the relationship between the German the boss and Julka, and then the other one concerning the dialogue between Camille and his cousin? Brother, yeah, which also is related to Julka's pregnancy, and we thought it was interesting how that section of the excerpt is less wordy, is shorter than the other section, the one set between the two women who seem to engage more in conversation, although they don't share the same mother tongue, and we thought how that in a sense emphasizes stereotypes about gender differences maybe, but also different ways of approaching the issue of pregnancy from a migratory perspective. So, for example, whereas the two women seem to try and very quickly find a solution for the problem through the German boss's offer of an apartment that would allow Julka to stay and have her baby, the two men just babble things without really coming to any conclusion, and just sighing and mumbling really, and so being much less practical about the event. Yeah, so we talked about the experience then in terms of both motherhood and the migratory movement in terms of those gender differences, and also in terms of how that experience can be seen as both an issue of vulnerability but also a moment of freedom, and how that also depends on the different on the gender differences of the characters. So, for example, for Camille, the experience of migrating to Germany allowed him a new freedom because he leaves behind another family in Turkey and engages in a new relationship with Julka. Whereas for Julka, the experience becomes much more precarious with the event of pregnancy. So pregnancy, in a sense, undermines her aspirations and her desire to be successful in Germany. And so therefore, an experience that was already with a certain degree of vulnerability, which is that of the migrant worker, becomes even more so by the fact that she is pregnant, and that therefore seems to be important gender differences in the way that migratory movement is experienced. Yeah, we related also that and the different reaction to pregnancy, to the pregnancy of Julka. Also, from the point of view of the textual display of the narrative, which seems very different, and so there is much more narrative detail in the woman's reaction and in the conversation between. So it's not just the dialogue that it's more extensive, but there is also more narrative background, more information on the characters and the characters' reaction from the point of view of the narrator, who is Suna or Luisa, whereas in the section dedicated to the dialogue between the two men, the two brothers, there is much less detail, and the dialogue is much more abrupt. So there seems to be some sort of stylistic difference between these two moments of the narrative, and we thought that was an interesting thing to address. Okay, so just very briefly then, for some important themes that I think we addressed was, first of all, this idea of mother and motherland, and this connection with mother seems to be in the text almost embraced as a biological, in terms of a biological origin that is looked after, and it's looked for throughout the narrative, and that somehow seems to counter-argue a more dynamic relation, or a more dynamic account of the migratory experience. But having said that, we also concluded that motherhood and the fact that the narrator or the character involved has a child in the new country reconfigures as well the relationship with both the country of origin and the country of destiny, at the same time that it also enhances the precarity or the precarious position of that same character. And I think that's it, really. I mean, yeah, I mean,